Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Cox, and I'm the host of the New America Movement right here in South Carolina. And we're so excited to have you tuning in today because we've got some great subject matter to talk about. We're going to be talking about January the 6th. Isn't it amazing the left are still talking about it? And now they're having all these hearings as if the conservative party, the Republicans, are the devil, and we have tried to overthrow the government. Wow. Jordan's my co-host. Jordan, good to have you on the show again. What do you think about all this junk, Jordan? Jump in on it.
Well, first of all, it's the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. But I just want to real fast bring in a special guest that we got who was actually there on January the 6th. And his name's Corey Allen of the Overton Report.
Corey, tune in. How you doing today, buddy?
What's up, guys? Hey, man, it's really good to be on this show. And, I love what you guys do. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I don't think we get enough of it.
Absolutely. So just real fast, that in the summer of 2020 with Black Lives Matter.
Let's talk about that a little bit because we saw during the Trump administration, the last year before he was voted out of office, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, many of these left-wing political groups using an extreme amount of violence and rhetoric toward right-wing conservatives, Trump supporters, people who believe Trump was the man for the hour, doing a great job. We're just supporting our president. We just like what he's doing. Nothing wrong with that. But, of course, the left doesn't like it, and they're not supposed to like it. It's their job to demonize any president that is not a part of their party. I understand that, but they took a little bit too far, and they're sort of hypocritical in the fact that they winked at all the billions of dollars worth of damage that Antifa and Black Lives Matter consistently did throughout this country every time they got the opportunity. And matter of fact, there was an extreme amount of violence by these groups. At almost every platform that they were a part of, you saw Black Lives Matter and Antifa seeking out conservatives, seeking out people who they thought opposed their agenda, and they did everything they could to incite violence on those people, and they did. Maxine Waters even said, violence is okay. Get in the face of these people. Stand up. Do not let them put you in a corner. Many of these left-wing politicians were okay with violence. And if you attended any of these events, then what you saw is that the left were very, very much a part of anger and hatred toward the right. And violence was always on the table. I didn't hear any Democrats calling out Black Lives Matter and Antifa and other groups saying, put your weapons down, don't hurt anybody. We're not a violent country. Matter of fact, many of the political right-wing leaders like Ben Shapiro who went to these campuses faced extreme violence like at Berkeley University. And these guys had to have several bodyguards to even get them into these universities. I never heard the left call them out. They would go in and speak on a conservative platform, and what did they get for it? They got booed, they got heckled, they were threatened physically. So now you have January 6th roll around, and, you and I were at a lot of these Trump meetings. Matter of fact, we were there on January the 6th, but we left around 11:30 and went back to our hotel at the Hilton around 11:30 in Alexandria.
And turned on the TV.
So we're sitting in here watching a movie, and all of a sudden, wow, what is going on? But I will say from my perspective, and I'm just a small voice among thousands of people that were there, I never met anybody, heard anything that sounded like there was a coup or an attempt to overthrow the government or to cause any bodily harm on anybody. Now, Corey, you actually went to the Capitol, if I understand this correctly. Tell us what you saw. But before you do, let me say this. The reason we're having hearings is not because the left are concerned about what we did, because they did that and did worse. They're only using this as a ploy because they know their numbers are in the tank. They know they're going to lose these primaries. They're going to lose these elections. We're going to take the House back, hopefully the Senate. We're going to get a new Republican president in the office in the next election. And they're running scared because their numbers are in the tank. They're doing a terrible job leading this country. Look at inflation. Look at how they handle foreign policies. And you could go on and on and on and talk about the failures of the Democratic Party in just the last 2 years. And now they've got to have some kind of game to hold their party together. And they want to demonize the right. They want to make us look like the devil, like we are anarchists, and we want to destroy the country. Is that true? Of course it's not true, but that's what they want to do. And that's what all these hearings are about. They don't care. They're not concerned about the public. They're only concerned about power, and that's what you're going to get from them over the next several months. Corey, what do you think? Take off on it.
So you touched on a lot of things there. First, I want to say, we definitely were there. We were one of probably the first 100 people on the grounds that day because we left Donald Trump's speech early in order to because we've been there personally to hear Donald Trump speak numerous times. So we left early in order to capture the footage of these hundreds of thousands of people walking on the National Mall and Constitution Avenue down to the Capitol building. When we got there, it was right when things were about to take off. And it was a very surreal experience, I'll say. But if you remember, it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours before things really got out of control to the point where people actually went into the Capitol and things like that. But you touched on the leftists encouraging violence and Democratic political officials encouraging violence for an entire year. And I think a lot of people forget that. I think a lot of people that are independents, conservatives never forget that. But independents and Democrats, they try to act like January 6th had happened in some kind of vacuum. But they forget, according to the Daily Mail, I was just looking at it, $2 billion of damage at least, and over 140 cities facing riots. I know that they don't include Charleston, for example, in one of the 140 cities that had riots, but there was definitely a riot in Charleston as well. And multiple chasing people off the streets and things like that in Charleston in the lead up all through 2020. You talked about how the Democrats need something to hold this fake moral high ground on regarding January 6th. I think you're absolutely spot on with that. I think that that's also why the Roe v. Wade decision was mysteriously leaked the first time in history. I think that it is the left knowing that they're failing in controlling the narrative and tossing things out to their base and to independents, hoping that it will help them retain power. But I think most of us see through that.
No, I definitely agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. Conservatives see it, and the independents and the Democrats that just kind of want to brush it up under the rug and never come back to revisit the conversation ever again. But until January 6th, they want to, or I should say, for January 6th, that's when they want to come and say, oh, well, this is violence. This is the worst thing we've seen ever. This is, they throw all of these terms at you, all of these phrases. I mean, I've heard it, being called the worst thing since the Civil War. I've heard it called the worst thing since, I can't remember. There's so many. They're just so that they've compared them to so many things, to horrible things like the Holocaust. I mean,
yeah.
Well, let me say this. You're right. I want to ask you a question. What other song can they sing about? They're singing this song loud and clear, but tell me what song the left have to sing other than this, because they have failed at everything they've done in the last 2 years. This is the only song they've got. That's all they can do. What do you think, Corey?
I could tell you if their intention was to sing a song of truth, here are some of the other songs they could sing. In the 80s, the Capitol building was bombed by a far left feminist group. Literally a bomb. A literal bomb went off, Bill Clinton, yeah, that Bill Clinton, he pardoned the woman responsible. That woman works for BLM International to this day. We'll always hear these groups saying that January 6th was this unprecedented event, right? It never happened before. I think that would be kind of a precedent, right? 2018, Justice Kavanaugh, during his confirmation hearings in the Senate, thousands of leftists invaded the Capitol, not outside. They went inside the Capitol. They barricaded senators and Senate staffers into elevators and into their own offices. They broke into the Senate chambers as they were holding the hearings. Was that called an insurrection?
No.
No. You know what the media actually said? MSNBC.
Protesters on Capitol Hill, you've been reporting all week about how high the tensions are. Where do things stand this hour?
Is by far the largest and most well-organized protest against Brett Kavanaugh that I've seen yet this week. And it's really coming at the right time from the protesters' perspective.
Well, I'll tell you what, this comes at a great time for the protesters. They're trying to get Joe Manchin to change his vote, trying to get them to not confirm Kavanaugh. You remember, they were all dressed in like Handmaid's Tale, like fictional characters. It's like, okay. It's like a bunch of Harry Potter fans trying to get involved in politics. Guys, that's not a thing. These people have this selective memory that has been so detrimental to American politics and politics as a whole, society as a whole. They do this all the time. Lori Lightfoot 2 weeks ago said, this is a call to arms because of the Roe v. Wade decision.
Mm-hmm.
Is that violent?
Mm-hmm. And not just that, there's people, Democrat leaders that have tweeted out to show your anger physically. It just begs the question. It just has to beg the question. Why are they making? Is it just because they got nothing else to run on?
I'm telling you, because they don't have another song to sing. What are they going to talk about?
Well, because
the economy?
If that's all you got, if all you got's January the 6th, that is going to be a plane that has got no engines, got no wings, and it's full of nothing but dummies just on a nosedive.
Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Do you think the Democrats care about minorities in this country? Corey, answer that question.
Not a chance. As a voting bloc, do they care about the getting their vote?
They care about their vote, but do they care
about them?
Right.
Of
course they don't.
No way.
Of course they don't, because there's been no policies that's actually helped minorities in this country. So the argument here is this is just about power. When you have no more game, when you have failed at every policy in the last 2 years, when prior to your election, you said Trump was the worst president in history, and that if you're in office, this is what you're going to do. You get in office and you literally destroy the country. You have more upheavals in foreign policy than we've had since World War II. You have insurrections in this country like we have never seen, driven by the left ideology. They're driving the racist issue. They're driving Black Lives Matter. They're driving Antifa. They're trying to split this country up. And now, here that they've had power, they don't have anything to talk about. And they control the media, so what are they going to say to the American people that, oh, look what we've done in the economy. Look what we've done in foreign policy. There's no song to sing there. The only thing they can do is go in the back room, pour some hot coffee, and say, how are we going to handle this disaster? We've got to talk about something. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. Let's talk about January the 6th. Even though we've been singing that song, let's just bring the song out again and talk about it. So what do you think?
Well, before you answer that, Corey, I just want to touch on one thing. One thing. The fact that they are televising this, the fact that they are putting this on Hulu. I did a little live thing myself, just by myself, a few days ago, and I was laying in bed, and I was literally trying to find something to watch on Hulu. And the first thing that popped up, Corey, the first thing was attack on the Capitol. January 6th. And it literally says below it an ABC like production, pretty much. I'm paraphrasing that part, but it's and it's because they brought in a guy from ABC News or from the TV network to make this an entertainment thing. So if you ever in your life, Corey, seen such a violent and horrible and God, this is the worst thing ever in American history. Our democracy was threatened. Have you ever seen that made live into a TV show and have a bunch of leftists on it that are making it?
It's interesting because you're right that they hired a TV producer for reality TV shows to produce this obvious example of political theater. That's one. Second, the way this, if you take a look at during January 6th, there was a lot of confusion in the first couple of hours. And then towards the evening, when it started to get dark, about 5:30, 6 o'clock, that's when you started seeing this narrative, this very obviously organized narrative start to form. If you were watching CNN, even Fox News, you were watching MSNBC, that narrative, right? That nutshell narrative where they started talking, and it continued for days, where they started talking about an officer that was murdered by protesters. Turned out he had a stroke. He died of a stroke later that night. Completely irrelevant. I'll tell you what, it's more likely that stroke was caused by a certain shot than it was anything that happened that day. And then it turned out that the only people who were actually killed had been killed by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's political police force that is the Capitol Police. They are under the direct jurisdiction and control of the Speaker of the House, which was Nancy Pelosi and still is, unfortunately. So this is a political police force, and they were doing political things. We have released footage recently of a lot of those Capitol police officers shooting flashbangs and pepper spray deep into the crowd, forcing the crowd to move up. And again, this is before anyone breached the Capitol. They were, as well as anyone, that if you shoot something deep into a crowd, it forces that crowd to spread apart.
Absolutely.
Which forced the crowd to move forward, pushing up onto the gates and the fences. And then they continue doing that, forcing them to push up and push up and push up. And screaming. We've released footage of some of the Capitol police officers screaming in the faces of protesters as they're standing at a barrier, not wanting to cross it, just spitting in their faces. They're standing right there at a barrier doing nothing, and they're just like coming around them and pepper spraying them, macing them in the face. These things are purposeful escalations. And you take that into account, along with them denying allowing the National Guard to be present during all of this stuff, even after knowing and getting, real information that it could get a little crazy. Donald Trump had already signed off on allowing the National Guard to be activated. Muriel Bowser and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer said, no, we're not using them. That's on purpose. They did that because they needed something to escalate to the level that every BLM protest in the country up to that point had escalated to. They needed that footage. And so they did everything in their power to get it. That's why you have CNN operatives and CNN journalists being embedded with a bunch of the groups that went in, had no charges against them, right? And then CNN was playing it within 45 minutes of them being in there. They got that footage that quick, and they paid for it. That's all documented.
I love how you brought the National Guard up, because that is something that I find is going to be a very interesting topic in these hearings. Because if first of all, if someone gets on there and says, look, this is proof that the National Guard was supposed to be there, and this is proof that Nancy Pelosi and whoever else said no to the National Guard after getting, because we all know it's well documented that the FBI and a whole bunch of other people, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, but even the White House, I believe, got informed that there was going to be a riot or protest, or there was rumors about it circulating. And they actually took officers back and didn't bring them up. They actually told officers to go home, some of them, and stuff. So it's going to be interesting to me in these hearings, because that's a big deal to me. Because that went from you could have stopped it to never even escalating to that level to now we're kind of looking at is this really something that was purposefully done?
Or allowed to happen at least.
Or at the very least allowed to happen.
Well, you can't have Senate hearings and just talk about what you think Trump did to provoke it without taking accountability of the fact that you allowed it to happen. They knew this was going to happen. And to say that this is all Trump's fault is ludicrous. The American people have to be smart and say, hey, there's no doubt, because you told the National Guard not to show up. You allowed this to take place because you needed it to happen and for political purposes.
Absolutely. And you can't even say it's Trump's fault in there, because because if you are going to make that the hill to die on, Trump's words were violence. If that's what you're going to hang your hat on, then absolutely the absolute only thing that's going to happen is they're going to say, what about Maxine Waters? Just like Corey said, what about Maxine Waters? What about Lori Lightfoot? All of these other people that have said, go get in the faces of these people. Now, I don't know about y'all, but someone gets in my face, it's not going to be a pretty situation. And I don't know too many other people that are going to think the same, any different than that.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think Republicans are violent?
No.
Do you think Democrats are violent?
Absolutely.
Well, here's my take. I think that when you put any human being in a situation and you push their emotions and you push a political agenda that they may not like or they feel threatened with, every human being has the potential to do stupid stuff.
Absolutely.
Here's my take. The government has a responsibility to act appropriate when they have the knowledge to do so. You cannot deny the fact that our government at this time on January the 6th, on January the 5th, they knew this was a potential. They knew they needed the National Guard. They knew this could escalate, but they chose not to do it. Now, here is the reason why. Because you know that all human beings can get caught up into emotional violence. We saw that in Washington when we had to deal with Antifa. Got in our face, and man, if we'd have flinched, they'd have probably killed us. Corey, you've been there. You've seen the violence when you confronted Black Lives Matter. It'll run for your life.
And Antifa.
So you can't say it's just by nature for people to do stupid stuff. It is our responsibility as leaders, and it's the responsibility of the government. When you know those things potentially can happen, what do you do? And to prove that, why do we have Homeland Security? Because we're running information on people who could possibly be a terrorist, and we stop the plot before it occurs. That's the whole purpose of Homeland Security. You hear of a threat, you chill it before it ever gets to that level. So you're going to tell me our government didn't know this and they were caught blindsided? No, the left knew this was going to happen, but man, look at the ratings. Look at the power they got out of this. And so I put the responsibility solely on them as well, because they knew everything that anybody else knew. They knew this more. Did not catch them off by surprise, and they welcomed it. They let it happen. It's like a lamb being led to the slaughter. They knew it was coming. All they had to do was say, hey, come get the bait. Come get the bait. So, these Senate hearings are only to gain control. It is only about getting power for the election. It's the only song they have to sing. There is not another song. And as far as Hulu and these things that are popping up, they got these algorithms. So when you type in movies, they're going to make sure that pops up first so that you have an opportunity to see it.
You don't even have to type it in.
Yeah,
you don't even type it in. It's just as soon as it's just right there.
It's all politics. Politics.
It is right there. And you cannot tell me. Kyle Rittenhouse's case wasn't on Hulu. They didn't have a TV producer come in, a reality TV producer come in for this. And this, I just want to touch on this. Speaking of Kyle, I just want to touch on this because during and Corey, you can kind of contest to this too. During the riots in the summer of 2020, murder actually happened, like legitimate murders. During the summer of 2020, vandalism and buildings and all sorts of things happened. Just like you said, $2 billion worth of damage. On January the 6th, none of that took place.
Man, let me touch on that. Let me touch on that, man, because this is great. Okay. During 2020, you remember the Summer of Love, a domestic group of political extremists on the West Coast literally created their own autonomous zone separate from the United States and use weapons and barricades to enforce their mob rule. If there is anything in our nation's history that could ever be called an insurrection, that would be it. Like they were literally going around collecting taxes, extortion money from small businesses. If you don't give us this money, we're going to burn your business down and kill you. People literally died. Chaz, you remember? The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone? Okay, so that is an example of the double standard, right? They literally tried to create their own nation within the nation of the United States. We had a couple of bad actors that broke some windows. None of the statues were even knocked over. And you know what I mean? None of the they broke windows to get in, and they went in and that Viking was like cosplaying, you know, doing what he was doing in Senate chambers after they had evacuated. The government shot a woman in the throat, beat another woman to death, and then they try and say that was some type of insurrection, although nobody is being charged with or convicted of insurrection. Why is it that we allow these types of double standards to happen? I think it's because we know that the left are nothing but they're run by nothing but children. They're run by nothing but children, and we as conservatives, for some reason, we allow them to paint these false narratives because we use this common sense of nobody in their right mind is going to believe that. Well, I hate to break it to you, but look around. In America, not many people are in their right mind. At least 50% of them are out of their minds. So we have to start fighting these narratives. We have to start fighting back against these false narratives.
Let me share something. I know our time is running out, but interesting enough, Kavanaugh, his life was threatened this week. A guy by the name of Nicholas John, I think it's Roski, 26 years of age, out of California. He flies to Kavanaugh's neighborhood and he calls 911 and says, "Hey, I've got some mental issues. I want to kill this guy." The point I want to make here is that everybody on both sides has a few crazies out here. You can't control. When you fire people up, you're going to get logic and you're going to get illogic. You're going to get reason and you're going to get these people who have these totally irrational responses to how they're going to solve problems. One man said that if you haven't eaten in 7 days, you have the potential to kill someone for food. When you push people to a point to where they feel that you have taken their hope away or that you have turned your country into something that they dislike, you're going to have anarchy, and it's going to be on both sides. To suggest and say that because of the Supreme Court's new ruling on Roe versus Wade, that you're going to have this entire right and left party of all Americans that are going to act rationally and responsibly, you would be a stupid fool to believe that. You're going to have crazies come out of all levels of America with ways that they think they need to handle it. And a lot of it's going to be violent. Violence is a part of politics. It shouldn't be, but look around the world. Look what's happened in thousands of years when you fire people up, when you anger people, when you manipulate people, when you lie to people, when you deceive people. The Democrats have had control of this country for a year and a half, and look at the mess it's in. Look 2 years ago at the state of the country. We had low inflation. Unemployment was at an all-time low. Gas was $1.60, 70 cents a gallon. Foreign policies, I mean, we had the best foreign policy that I have ever seen in my lifetime. And the left could not stand it, and they demonized this guy over and over again over things that had nothing to do with things that he was doing in the country. They just didn't like his tweets. They didn't like his house rules, his house manners. Okay, I get that. I understand that. But look at where we are today and look at where we were 2 or 3 years ago, and tell me that the average Joe in America sitting on his couch feels better about the country. Of course, you'd have to say, I don't feel better about it, because this country's getting out of control. You're going to incite people, and that's what you see in people that I think have mental health issues. If you can't have reason and logic, you're going to lose this country. The problem is all these left-wing crazy people that have gotten a hold of this country, like the AOC and the Four Horsemen, whose goal is to really wreck this country. They are very anti-American people. What do you think's going to happen? Answer that, Corey.
Well, I have to say something, man, because you're right. You said that there are crazies on both sides, right? And that is true. There are crazies on all sides of any issue. But there's this very, very major difference that I think isn't talked about enough. On the right, when we have crazy people who do crazy things or say crazy things, they are ostracized. They are completely dismissed as crazy by conservatives, by the right. But when you have the same thing happen on the left, when you have crazies doing crazy things and saying crazy things, the left not only holds them up as heroes and places them on pedestals, they put them in office. They put them on television. They make the crazies their leaders. That is truly what we have seen. Like, there's nobody that is being held up on the right. David Duke is a good example of this. The dude's a crazy, racist, piece of trash, fascist. I'm a conservative. We're all conservatives. And we all call him that. The left will take the worst of the people that lead BLM. Great example. Calling for riots. Lori Lightfoot. Literally in Columbia, South Carolina last week, they had a bunch of gang members coming up and having a conference with media and politicians, state politicians, telling them what the politicians need to do in order to keep the gangs from deciding to kill each other anymore. That's the left. Okay? That's the difference. We relegate our crazies to the loony bin where they deserve to be. The left puts theirs in office. And they're their leaders. That's the difference.
That may be the most logical thing I've ever heard.
It's sad that our government has, the left have learned how to build a platform to control the media and run with the narrative and depend on stupid people to buy into their ideology. And that's what you're seeing. You're right. I agree with that. There are crazies on both sides. There are no simple answers to this. I just tell people, look, be smart, educate yourself on politics, learn what the real facts are. Don't believe everything you see on TV. Study and know your game so that you can defend it and you can speak logically about it. And get out and vote. That's our only channel that we have to change our society today. You got to get out and vote, and you got to know who to vote for, and you got to protect the rights of this country. Corey, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Jordan, say a word, and I'm going to let Corey close us out.
Yeah, I just want to say, guys, this has been a good show. Comment, like, share, and follow New American Movement. Corey, give us a shout out, bro. What's up?
Yeah, man. Thank you guys for having me on. I'll just say that consistency is probably the word of the day. When you have a situation where there's a year of lockdowns, of schools shutting down, of indoctrination being exposed, of people's businesses being forced to shut down, and then on top of that, having leftist political actors come and destroy things in hundreds of cities throughout the nation, and then a bunch of crazy stuff going on in an election, and there are questions that are dismissed outright. you're gonna get a little pushback. I'm not condoning what happened on the 6th. Absolutely. Of course not. Of course not. But it has to be looked at in context. And also, if you want to know the truth about a lot of these issues, follow New America Movement and also follow the Overton Report on YouTube. You can just search us, Rumble, and the Overton Report.substack.com. That's where all of our investigations are. You'd be really surprised what's being hidden from you by local corporate media. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Corey, for being on our show today. I'm going to close with this little quick word. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, do your job. The next time you see something like this happening and you know what's going to occur, don't tell the National Guard not to show up. Do your job. Had you done your job, we wouldn't be having this conversation at this time. Jordan, thank you for being on the show. It's been a great show. These are hot topics. Appreciate you tuning in and talking to us about all these very sensitive issues around the country. God bless you. It's New America Movement. We'll see you next week.